When dealing with simple harmonic motion, we're going to start to deal with specific terms that we utilize in actually measuring that motion. There's three main terms we're going to start to talk about, three main properties of simple harmonic motion, and they are the amplitude of that motion, the period of that motion, as well as the frequency of that motion. So we're going to talk about these in more detail moving forward. This will also be information we relate to waves, sound, and light as we, again, continue to move forward. So it's going to be really important to understand these concepts as best we can. When dealing with simple harmonic motion, we're going to really talk about two different examples. One is the mass spring system, which, as the name states, incorporates a mass suspended by a spring, and a pendulum, which is obviously some kind of mass suspended by a string or bar, anything that allows it to essentially rotate back and forth in this direction. And obviously the spring will travel up and down based on whether you pull it or push it up and then let it go. This will eventually oscillate, and this pendulum will oscillate much in this fashion. These are the two main examples we're going to deal with, so just get used to seeing them. There's some slight differences between them, but a lot of similarities. So moving forward with this chapter, we're going to be dealing with these two situations mainly. So that first term we were talking about was the amplitude. And it's important to realize that the amplitude is at the maximum displacement from the equilibrium point, the point where this mass or this object wants to be. That's that equilibrium point. So if we take a look here at this mass spring system, imagine these are the same exact spring, just three different points in time. So if we take a look at this middle one right here, we're going to go ahead and we're going to assume that that's our equilibrium point. So if we go ahead and assume our equilibrium point is right here, this is where it would like to be. Okay, it wants to be right there. Well, in this example, if I were to actually push that up to its maximum point of maximum displacement, it won't go up anymore. That's going to be my amplitude. And when I let go of it, it's going to begin to oscillate up and down, back and forth. And when it reaches the very bottom, it will reach a point down the bottom where it will go no further and it'll begin to travel back up. And in that case, that amplitude for the same mass spring system, these will be equal and opposite in direction. Okay, but that amplitude would be the same. If we take a look at the example of a pendulum, very similar. We have the equilibrium point right here. This is where this pendulum wants to be naturally. And if we were to pull it back and let go of it, it would, let's say if we pulled it back here, as soon as we let go, it would swing over here to this point, at which point it would return back and forth. And what we'll be talking about here in each of these cases, the amplitude would be that maximum displacement in either direction from that equilibrium point. And again, these would be equal and opposite generally. We'll talk about cases, how this may increase or decrease. But overall, these amplitudes will be the same. It should go in the same, it should go the same distance in this direction initially as it will in this direction. So it's measured in meters. It's a displacement, right? It's a distance. So we're talking about meters here. So it's important to realize that. The period and the frequency are slightly different in that they both involve time. Okay, both of them involve time in some way. Period, which is we use the variable t, capital T, to represent the period. That's the time taken to complete one cycle. So what that means is if I have, let's say I have an equilibrium point somewhere in the middle. Let's say that this spring naturally wants to be somewhere in between these two. So at some point I've pulled this up and I've allowed it to start oscillating back and forth. If that's where it would like to be, well, when I pull it up, it's going to have an amplitude in both directions. It's going to begin to oscillate back and forth. Okay, well, as it oscillates back and forth, the period is the time that it's going to take to go down and back up and return to its original position. So think of it as one cycle. It needs to start here. You're going to let go. It's going to go all the way up. It's going to come all the way back down. That's one period. Okay, so how much time it takes to complete one cycle to return to its original position. Because it's a unit of time, we're going to measure that in seconds. So if I take this spring and I pull it down and I let go and it takes 1 second to go all the way up and come all the way back down, my period is 1 second. Similarly, a pendulum is going to act in the same way. If I pull this pendulum back and I let go, it will swing this way, at which point it will turn around and come back. If that takes me 1 second, my period would be 1 second. It takes 1 second for one complete cycle to occur. Frequency, somewhat similar, but it's actually the number of complete cycles occurring in 1 second. So you're not looking at the number, you're not looking at how many cycles it completes. I apologize. You're looking at the number of cycles it completes in 1 second. You're not looking at the time it takes to complete one cycle. I apologize for that. So in a case here, if I were to pull this down and I were to let go, and it's going to complete number of cycles in 1 second, that's going to give me my frequency. Okay, so what I will do is instead of counting the time, instead of measuring 1 second, I'm going to count how many times, how many complete cycles occur within 1 second. So in the example of a mass spring system, my question in terms of frequency would be, in 1 second, in given time of 1 second, how many complete up and down cycles would have occurred. Similarly with a pendulum, if I account for 1 second, if I have a stopwatch and I can measure 1 second of time, in that 1 second, how many times, how many complete cycles would this pendulum have completed? Okay, so it's measured in hertz, which is abbreviated capital H and lowercase z. And again, the hertz is just, the hertz, or a hertz, is just 1 hertz, is the number of cycles occurring in 1 second. So